Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 2nd, 2020, and this video probably won't upload in time for it to actually be Thursday. It'll probably register under Friday because it's 11:40 p.m. right now. But today we're going to be taking a look at a Pete Buttigieg-Donald Trump matchup, pretty much on a nationwide level. Obviously, that's just how it goes. This would be assuming Pete Buttigieg wins the nomination. I will be doing a Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and possibly Bloomberg prediction later on. The Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren one will probably be tomorrow and the day after that. But I decided to go with Pete Buttigieg today, just mainly because he hasn't been covered much on my channel. I haven't really made election predictions between the two, besides a couple election nights, and he is probably the least well-known candidate amongst the top four. So let's go ahead and start listing out all of the safe states. Generally, the same states are going to be considered safe, except for Indiana this time. If you don't know, Pete Buttigieg is a mayor from the state of Indiana, from a town called South Bend. I believe it is in a Republican area. Obviously, the city isn't, but I believe it is in a Republican area. So just for a little bit of context, it's not a super big city, but it's not like a rural town either. But that doesn't really hold much weight for his presidential bid. It's actually surprising how well he's done, given the fact that he's from such a small area and such a secluded area, that he's been able to rise to, I guess, power so quickly. Not really power, but to fame or media attention so quickly. So 182, usually it's about 185. Oh, because Maine first, second, first at large. We're not characterizing at large yet. So Maine's first district goes to Pete Buttigieg. Donald Trump at 114. That's not right. What state am I forgetting? Usually it's 125. Oh, Indiana, but Indiana isn't a safe state this time. So Donald Trump is at 114 quote-unquote safe electoral votes. Pete Buttigieg is at 183. Keep in mind, just because Pete Buttigieg is from the state of Indiana, it does not mean that Indiana will go to Pete Buttigieg. There are plenty of times where home state candidates don't win their states. For example, in the year 2000, Al Gore did not win the state of Tennessee, even though it went to the Democrats the prior 2 election years. And Indiana actually last went for a Democrat with President Barack Obama in 2008. That was the first time it had gone for a Democrat in forever. I think since 1964, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely really weird scenarios with some of these. But right now, just taking a look at this electoral map, Pete Buttigieg starts off the same way any other Democrat would. But we're going to go ahead and hit the likely states, which are states like Texas. We know Texas is definitely going to be a likely state with Pete Buttigieg. One thing to know about Pete Buttigieg that is going to be emphasized throughout this entire video is that he cannot appeal to minorities at all. I mean, this man is adored by white Democratic voters, thus his leads in Iowa and New Hampshire. He actually is behind in Iowa now on the overall average, but regardless, being ahead in both of those states as a very small candidate, you really need a base to support you. And in those states, they are predominantly white states. They are predominantly white Democratic voters, and he's from Indiana. So it's not exactly like he's from an area that is stereotyped as with a lot of minorities, which it would have been better for Pete Buttigieg if he had came from the South and wanted to appeal to African-American voters. But he's coming from a state that's already considered Republican, from a small town, and his only base, I mean, there's a video of him at an HBCU where he's speaking to, I mean, a bunch of people, but they're all white at an HBCU, and it just really showed how little African-American and, just in general minority support that he had nationwide, which is something that is crucial to the Democrats every election season. But Pete Buttigieg has something that a lot of other candidates don't, which is a regional advantage and an ability to, be adored by these white voters, not even just Democratic voters, but he definitely resonates with the white working class a lot better than some other Democrats might be able to. But Donald Trump still wins the state of Texas. That is going to go to him regardless. Georgia and actually North Carolina, I can see becoming likely states. Pete Buttigieg is not going to offer these states anything to work with. I mean, he would have to choose a phenomenal vice presidential candidate, and even then, it's still going to be hindering him in these states. I don't think he was expecting to win these states either. He definitely isn't in the primary season, but this is generally for people like Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden because of the Obama background, which is something that would help him. Pete Buttigieg needs to focus up in the North and the Rust Belt. That is his only pathway to victory if he does have one. So North Carolina, Georgia are Republican states. I would actually say Arizona joins the likely bunch, probably 5-6%, but still likely regardless. Though it's not a safe state anymore, I do think that Donald Trump would expand on his margin from 2016. Pete Buttigieg, again, is not the right candidate to appeal to Latino voters. And again, like I have been saying throughout this video, he really needs to work on his appeal to, in general, I guess, just minority voters. And if he does that, well, then he's solid. I mean, he has the white working class to vote, and then I'll have the minority vote, but it doesn't just come that easy. But when it comes down to it, if Pete Buttigieg is the nominee, he still will get the minority vote, but they will not be voting out in droves, and they will not be coming out in full-fledged support. A lot of them will be voting out of spite for President Trump, wanting to avoid whatever another 4-year term with President Trump, but it's definitely not going to be as energetic, and they're definitely not going to get the turnout numbers that they want if they run Pete Buttigieg as the actual nominee. But Virginia, I still expect to remain the same. I'm going to actually move it to the lean column for right now. Usually you characterize it as likely. New Mexico usually characterizes safe. Now going to be likely. Colorado is lean. Nevada, actually, I do expect Donald Trump to win here by a lean margin. That is something that is a little bit surprising, but data does back me up on this point. But right now, Nevada actually is not looking too good for Pete Buttigieg. It actually isn't looking good for a couple of Democrats, surprisingly. It seems like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are the only candidates that actually do well in some of these states, which I find to be surprising. But looking over in the Northeast, we're going to see Pete Buttigieg pick up New Hampshire, no problem. He's going to pick up Maine. I actually think Pete Buttigieg could flip the 2nd District back to the Democrats, and I know that may seem a little weird just because recently in 2016, the Democrats did not do well, but that was mainly because of Hillary Clinton. Pete Buttigieg, I think, has an ability to bring over voters that moved from Obama to Trump back to his column. One also thing that Pete Buttigieg does have to, worry about up in the Northeast is that he's going to be facing a lot of opposition from progressive Democrats. I mean, this is an area where people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are going to shine. A lot of people stereotype Pete Buttigieg as a conservative Democrat. I do expect him to do very well here because he's going to get their support at the end of the day and definitely bring over a number of, more of the white voters over to vote for him, which is a very big part of the population up in the Northeast. But he's definitely going to see some opposition from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. For Florida, I do expect Donald Trump to win Florida. That is something that I've been pretty solid on there. New Hampshire 2nd District, it really could go either way. I think Trump's going to narrowly edge it out by a tilt margin. That means less than 1%, by the way. I usually don't use it that often, but sometimes I do. Indiana, even though it is Pete Buttigieg's home state, I'm going to characterize it as likely just because it is a very solid Republican state with 2012, 2016. If you just look at the margin, it keeps on increasing. Always been a Republican state except for 2008. I don't think that one exception is going to make that much of a difference here. It's going to bring down the margin just a tad bit, but I still expect Donald Trump to pick up the electoral votes. And keep in mind, a victory is a victory. Win by one vote, you win all the electoral votes. But that puts Pete Buttigieg at 217, Donald Trump at 241. Now we're getting into where it's going to become very, very important. So let's go ahead and focus on states like Minnesota and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, Iowa, Ohio. Even though Pete Buttigieg does have this regional advantage in these states, I'm not seeing the support that he's going to need from these minority groups in big cities. Yes, he can do well amongst white voters. Nobody is disputing that. But when it comes down to it, you need that plus some if you're going to be overcoming an almost double-digit margin in both of these states from the previous presidential election year. And Ohio and Iowa, Iowa may not have a large minority population, but Ohio definitely does in the big cities. And if they're not voting, you can pretty much give up the state right there. Yes, gaining white voters was crucial to Obama's victory in 2008 and 2012. Hillary Clinton failed to do that in 2016. The white working class turned against the Democratic Party. Yes, minorities voted with the Democrats, as they usually do in every single state. But this time around, the white working class is staying for the Democrats or coming back, but minority voters are just not coming out. Pete Buttigieg is not excitable for people that probably won't be represented by someone like him in office, taking a look at where most of his support lies. That's definitely one of the main reasons why a lot of, minority communities have low turnout, mainly because they don't feel like they will be represented. And in reality, most of the time they aren't, which is why they definitely aren't going to be full-fledged support for people like Pete Buttigieg. But that puts Pete Buttigieg at 217, Donald Trump at 265. We can go ahead and characterize Minnesota. I think that one's going to go to Pete Buttigieg regardless. This is a really, really difficult. Where's the rest of the electoral votes? Because I feel like I'm missing something. It feels weird, just 46. Okay, I guess it is right over here. But I do think that Donald Trump will win this election. I do think Donald Trump will carry Wisconsin. In fact, this is not purely based on polling data, but if you take a look at it, actually, Donald Trump is ahead in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin, number one, was the most Republican one in terms of percentage back in 2016. Approval rating-wise, it looks really bad for Donald Trump across all three of these states. But again, Pete Buttigieg, I don't think he's going to be getting out those voters in Milwaukee. And if you go over to states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, we're going to talk about, because I think that one is actually more Democratic than the rest of them. I actually do think Pete Buttigieg could pick up Pennsylvania very narrowly. I'm going to leave it in a lean, but I do think that it would be a victory for Pete Buttigieg. I don't think that all three of them will vote together if it does come down to this scenario. It looks a little bit weird. I know. I really don't see this type of combination together most of the time. I really don't see Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin voting differently. Usually it's all three of them together, or maybe just Michigan blue. But actually, if you take a look at the data, Pennsylvania actually seems the best case for a lot of these Democrats. And that also makes sense. If you look back to 2018, had the most Democratic involvement in the state out of all three of the states, even though they all had large Democratic victories statewide. But that pretty much finalizes the video. Again, Pete Buttigieg's loss mainly attributes to his inability to bring out minority voters. That is fundamental for any Democrat running in this day and age. Yes, you can appeal to the white working class better than most other candidates, but if you're not getting that central core base that you rely on, and plus some, you're probably not flipping a lot of these states that actually, if you had the right factor with some of these candidates, you actually do, you could very well and easily flip. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.